Welcome to Writer Syndrome, podcast about writing from start to finish. This episode's topic, finding comps and originality. I'm Russ and joining me as always, Tim Letney. Tim, how original are you feeling today?
I'm feeling slightly derivative today, I think.
Yeah, just a little bit.
Just a little bit.
I wake up every morning feeling a little derivative.
A little derivative.
Right?
Yeah.
I think this is going to be a fun chat. I think finding comps is an interesting part of the process. I've had a very hard time doing this. We'll get into let's right off the top, what are comps, right?
Yeah, we should define it.
Yeah, so it's short for comparable titles, right? So books that might be considered comparable to your own. They're used in a lot of different ways, So, one of the obvious ones, especially if you're querying, which Tim's going to be doing, using
Knock
as
on wood.
Kind of as a quick reference for agents or publishing sales folks to understand where your book fits, right? It's even good for bookstores to understand where it should lie on the shelf, and also gives you a good idea who the reader's going to be, your demographic, right? So it's kind of a quick someone could look at this and be oh, okay, it's The Martian meets Ready Player One. Cool. It's gonna be sci-fi, a lot of research, maybe detail, whatever. So you get a sense of what the book's gonna be like.
Yeah, the idea being, right, that you are writing for an existing audience that's already purchased something similar.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
If you're interested in selling.
Yeah, pretty much. Right. And listeners, you'll probably have seen these and they're used everywhere. Marketing materials, you'll see them in ads, back cover blurbs, definitely. Take a book off your bookshelf and take a look at the back or inside cover flap. Sometimes you'll see hey, if you liked X, you'll like Y, or there's a bunch of other variations of it, it's this meets that.
You're plugging the other podcast?
I see how I work that in there. I plug the other podcast just like that. But yeah, you'll see it on Amazon listings, Goodreads, stuff like this. And like I said before, it's used for querying. So
it's tough, right? Because in my head, it feels very reductive.
Yeah.
Because you want to believe that your work is some special, magnificent thing, but you really want to get across that it's not. That it's a lot like this other flavor of ice cream that you'll enjoy.
Right. Yeah, this has been the hardest thing for me to do. And I still don't think I have good comps yet. I'm still pulling lists together, mostly for the marketing blurbs when I go to publish on Amazon and the other distributors, or even on Goodreads and stuff like that. Less concerned about using it for a query. Yeah, right now, originally I had just used movies to kind of compare. I was my book is basically an updated version of war games, hacking, world surveillance, not nuclear weapons, but the potential of the world attacking itself. And I was this is basically that updated.
How far along in the process were you, Russ, when you started looking into comps? Is this something that you oriented yourself before you started writing, or something that you did kind of during or after the fact? When
I first started on the process of just putting together the treatment and kind of outlining the major beats of the book, I started kind of getting a shape of at that point, I wanted to understand, or I wanted to know what was the vibe and feeling I wanted the book to have. So immediately I was of course we've talked about this before. I think you and I both go to movies first, but I was yeah, okay, war games. I want that kind of 80s vibe, but I want it to be a story told now, plot, more reflective of current times. But I want it to be that 2 or 3 friends coming together and, solving a problem type of vibe, the kids on bikes type of scenario from the 80s, and then I use that a lot of the 70s Gene Hackman, Robert Redford, spy surveillance thrillers, because I love those movies, The Conversation or Sneakers. And I was okay, that kind of sets the tone. And then when I started getting into actual book comps, the first thing that came to my mind was the first 2 actually was The Martian and Ready Player One. And Ready Player, my book is not nearly, it really isn't like either one of those, but in terms of, I think, author and character voices, which is something you can use for your comps. But in terms of author voice, narrative voice, and character voice, those 2 books really kind of captured the fun I wanted to have with the dialogue. And Ready Player One, just the flow of that book is just so much fun. So I was using that kind of originally. It's just it was more for me to set the tone and how I was going to write, the story. So,
yep.
But yeah, what about you? Did you have it right off the bat or later on, or?
It's similar, right? I feel I was curious where I was going to fall on a bookshelf. So I'd probably through most of my first draft before I started kind of asking myself, hey, is this marketable? Does this fit anywhere?
Yeah.
So then I started kind of looking the top 50, horror sci-fi novels of the past 10 years, stuff like that. And I came across comps that actually made me feel a little uneasy, because I was oh no, is mine too similar to this? There's this cat, his name's Paul Tremblay, He's a Massachusetts guy. He likes Bad Religion, which I am a big fan of. He wrote a book called Survivor Song, which is about like kind of like a rabies like wreck or like zombie apocalypse thing that takes place in mass in the Boston area. I didn't know that existed until I was just about done with my book, and I was like, "Oh my God, like is my brand already out there?"
Does it already exist? Oh no.
And like the books are very different. But I felt like a little bit of like, I don't know, what's the word? Like doppelganger. I was like, oh no, like this flavor is out there already. And once again, like you come across these comps, which are really good to measure yourself against, but they also can sometimes make you feel uncertain, or maybe you want to stop working on what you're working on. And is it good enough? Or does it already exist? And what value can you add to that genre or to that subgenre? And I hit that question multiple times when I was coming across comps.
Yeah.
Because I kept coming across not entire books, but slices of books that I was like, I do this, I do that.
Yeah.
It was this weird pastiche of like during the research phase, I felt like derivative accidentally.
Yeah.
And it makes sense. You know, they're all around the same age as I am. I have horror movie influences. Sometimes it's similar zip codes and musical tastes and stuff. So it was a little bit of like an inflection point for me.
Yeah.
And I mean, obviously I rallied and I was like, okay, just make sure that you're setting yourself apart and that your voice is as different as you think it is.
I mean, honestly, it sounds like to me, you just found a new best friend. Maybe you should reach out and hang out.
No, I mean, I always feel like
so
I never
similar.
want to go to somebody. I don't want to fanboy to anybody. You know, I don't want to ask anybody of anything.
Yeah.
Maybe that's a bad trait to have, but yeah.
You don't get anything if you don't ask, right? Is that how it works?
Yeah.
So it sounds like you're using it more for like marketplace fit. Did you use any for in movies too or TV shows, but did you use any to kind of like you wanted to mimic a tone from, or did you already know that in your head?
It's weird. I feel like I'm a combo, right? I have got my own voice and I've had it for a while, but it's really derivative of the stuff that I read in like my early 20s, like Survivor or Fight Club or, you know, so it was very, this like mixture of like Palmach and, you know, maybe Bret Easton Ellis and with like a tinge of like Clive Barker simplicity or even Stephen King. So then when I was like thinking about, okay, how, because, you know, through this whole podcast, we're like, how do you do this? Where do you put the dialogue tags? You know, like how often do you use them? Do you use them at all? I kept referring to Stephen King and coming back to, because where I naturally fit, I think is close to that kind of, you know, third person omniscient. So when I had a question about where's my POV at this moment, and I started to get cold feet, I'd go to like an old King book and open it up and just kind of randomly be like, okay, like where is he? Where's the POV? And it's kind of where I landed on that narrator mimicking the tone or the viewpoint of the main. Yeah. As opposed to it being, you know, very limited third, which I think is very popular now, which is Paul Tremblay writes in, or actually quite a lot in like Grady Hendrix as well, like in first person. And I just, you know, we talked about it before. I don't have interest in first person or even really limited third. Yeah, for me, it was mostly King, but I think I naturally fall there anyway, just based on my influences of what I've read, which is honestly like coming from like what I read up until this point was like literary fiction. I never dove as deep into genre fiction, at least horror fiction, right? I mean, I think I dabbled in sci-fi a little bit, but through like my academic quote unquote career, it was always just literary fiction. That's what I wrote my papers on, whether it was like Virginia Woolf or whatever else. So, but yeah, then I realized, right, like I needed to find out where I was going to fall with this book. So you at this point now, do you have like a couple that you're like solid that you're going to use as part of your query process? Yeah, I feel like, which I should throw out there too. So, I mean, I think it varies, but I think most agents and publishing folks, they do look for these as part of like their submission process, maybe, or it's good just to include it so it gives them an idea. It's kind of like the quick elevator pitch. But I think it varies. But do you have a couple you're ready to throw out there? Yeah, I feel like it's probably Paul Tremblay and Grady Hendrix, so probably Survivor Song. And interestingly enough, like one thing, it's weird, right? Because I'm writing a period piece, which is immediately like less marketable because people, especially younger people, don't necessarily want to read about a time before them.
Yeah.
But there's Stranger Things, right? And there's
Yeah.
that whole Stranger Things ecosystem. So I think it would be a disservice not to include that a little bit in the pitch,
Yeah.
even though that was not the impetus to do this. But it shows that there's a market for kind of nostalgia-driven content.
I had pulled up a couple articles just kind of researching beforehand, talking about like the things that you should look for when you're putting comps together, right? And already my comps are already blown out the water because they're all too old. But they're like, hey, yeah, you can definitely use something old. Like it should be within like 3 to 4 years. Whatever the material is, should be within like 3 to 4 years old. You can go older, but if you do, pair it up with something more contemporary, right? So I could probably do something like it's War Games meets something now, or within the last 3 to 4 years. Another thing I thought was pretty interesting, and a lot of research I came across, they were like, yeah, it's okay to use film and TV. And definitely authors, so you don't have to name just like a specific book. So you could be like, oh, I could say it's like War Games with like a tone of Ernest Cline, who wrote Ready Player One, right? Like, oh, that might be a good comp. Might be pushing it a little too into like the 80s vibe, which I mean, I don't want to get that across.
Right.
Also using different books, and I kind of touched on this just a little bit earlier, but using books that aren't just plot focused or genre focused, which I think is kind of interesting. You could use it for narrative voice, like saying Ernest Cline, an author, right? Even aspect of craft, which I thought was kind of interesting. And this kept popping up. Obviously, themes and atmosphere can all be used, so they don't have to necessarily be like pairing two horror books, or me being like, yeah, it's these 2 thrillers, titles. So you can get a little bit creative with it, but I think having at least one book and then maybe pairing it with something else can work. So
what about nonfiction?
I don't know.
I mean, I only bring it up because I'll say that like for research, I leaned on this kind of punk retrospective called Please Kill Me.
Yeah.
I don't think it sold particularly well. So maybe it's not.
The only thing I could think of by doing that was like you might throw people off and think it's like, oh, more of a researchy based, maybe. I don't know.
Right.
I was thinking for years it'd be kind of fun to pair it up with like some type of music from the time period. Like it meets like the punk scene of such and such. You know what I mean?
It's funny you say that because, I put together, since I had like music features really prominently in mine, like music from like, the mid to late 70s. And I put together, a mix that I would listen to while writing, especially during scenes that have music playing.
Yeah. It's probably the most fun part of doing this whole thing was putting together a playlist. But yeah.
I'll tell you, man, like never in a million years would I think that I'd sit down and listen to a punk mix and then Donna Summer would come on and I would be jamming to it, like just like vibing. And it actually gave me an appreciation for disco I never had before. Because in the 90s, it was really cool to kind of, actually always it's been cool to kind of poo-poo disco. But
yeah, I know exactly what scene that scene. I know exactly what scene in your book that song popped up for too. I can picture it.
Oh, yeah.
That's great. Yeah, one of the other things I kept coming across was what you don't want to do is use any major or super popular titles. So like me using The Martian or probably even Ready Player One, like the phenomenons like Hunger Games, Harry Potter's, I kind of stay away from those.
It makes me feel like Stranger Things would be an issue with that too, because there's probably a million queries that are like, it's kids on bikes in the 80s.
Yeah.
And this isn't. This is kids on heroin in the city.
Yes, completely different.
But it does have that kind of Goonies-esque, kids solving a problem.
Yeah.
Aspect.
What was your process for like searching for comps? Did you like how much time did you spend towards it? Did you just kind of you just knew off the top of your head, or you just like are you reading a couple books that happen to like fall in the genre?
That was it really. It was Googling. Yeah. I mean, this is pre GPT-4, so I didn't query AI like we talked about last week.
Yeah.
I just Googled and went through top lists and then checked to see what was in the library, grabbed those.
Yeah.
And then I ordered some on Amazon. Like I ordered Nick Cutter's The Troop. I think we talked about that in one of our first episodes.
Yep.
And I think I fall pretty nicely in there as well. Like I think that's a decent contemporary novel that I'm like, if it's not being adapted yet, I'm sure it will be adapted soon. Right. So I feel like that's one of those sleepers that will be nice to mention that isn't too popular yet.
Yeah. I had tried a bunch of different things. I don't think I've spent enough focused time on it, looking at my own bookshelf, but nothing was really there. And the ones that were there were too old. It's like, it's a thriller, espionage stuff. So it's like, again, like the Tom Clancy's or techno thrillers, even like the Daniel Suarez books, which are good, a little more science fiction-y. Like that's a little too much. So I think I need to sit down and really do some research. But I think talking to librarians is kind of a good one. It keeps popping up. They might be able to help point.
Wait, you can talk to librarians?
Yeah, I know. Isn't that crazy?
What?
I know. Do they even exist, or is AI taking them over?
Every time I try to talk to them, they're just like, shh.
It's because you come in like this. Hi, I need some comps, lady. Hey, book person. Master
hey,
book lady,
I need some comps.
Doing Amazon actually helps too, because you can, like you said, you can kind of search for like the top 10 lists and stuff like that. Especially with other categories, like breaking it down. Like I think of all the categories I'm going to list my book on Amazon. I kind of help give me a sense of like who's in here and who are the top ones. Some of the ways you can find comps. There's also some tools which I'm going to play around with, but I'll link with the post, but I haven't tried yet. There's like this thing called Book Browse, Literature Map, and Story Graph, where you can kind of punch in an author and it kind of connects to like different books are related to them. So it's like,
oh, that's neat.
Yeah, it's more of a tool for like you finding new books to read, but it's great for authors to find.
Is that an AI tool, Russ?
I don't think it is, actually. One of them might be. The Story Graph might be. I don't know. I didn't really look into it.
Slippery slope, man.
And as I mentioned, you can use ChatGPT, but make sure you do your research on it.
Oh, yeah, right. You were saying that you typed it in, right? And it came up with a completely fictional author?
I am more than positive the author and the book do not exist. Like, if you've written a book, like I should be able to find it somewhere, and I couldn't find it anywhere, or the person I had written, not even a Facebook page. I'm like, I think this person is fake. So be careful if you use ChatGPT.
So Russ, when you were doing your research, right, did you come across things that almost derailed you? That like kind of gave you a minute to, did you rethink what you were writing at all based on the landscape?
No, because I don't think I'm original. No. Once you come to grips with it that you're not, and maybe you're just your voices, then you're okay. There was one book. I'm losing the title of it right now. Like a lot of the beats and kind of the plot was pretty similar. And that one got me. I was like, oh man, okay. But then once I got to the end of it, after like reading, I think it started out kind of very similar, at least some of the characters and some of like the plot moments, the beats were similar, and that got me a little nervous. And as I got to the end of it, I was like, no, this is same but different, which I'm okay with. Also just the tone and of the voice were different. Obviously, I think the author I had read, it was a little more refined. I had written, handful of books, where mine was still a little, I'm still a little new to the process, but like the dialogue in that book was stale, and I think mine's kind of fun. Whatever, to pat myself on the back. I don't know, it's different, I should say. And there's a lot of other thrillers that I've read that are similar in terms of tone, but again, a lot of it is just kind of characters moving through a plot, and the characters are all pretty generic. Not to say that mine are something special. I mean, I think they are, but again, I could already feel like the tone I had, like I have that like sneakers, war games kind of little bit of, injected life into it, which I think kind of changed the tone a bit. So it's not so like the classic stale thrillers, with a silhouetted guy in the front cover. Yeah.
I mean, I feel similarly with mine, right? Like if anything's original, it's the characters.
Yes.
I mean, otherwise it's kind of a mashup of like horror and creature feature. Yeah, I text you every time that I come across a comp that is similar to mine, and it drives me batty, all caps or something.
Yeah, I have to like walk you off the ledge. I'm like, it's okay, just keep working.
Like just recently I was not reading, I was like listening to a book by Christopher Golden called All Hallows. Like the plot of it's completely different than mine, yet it's a period piece. It's kind of late high school teens. One of the main characters is very similar to one of my main characters, to the point of where we have the same reference of Susie Sue with makeup. And I was like, oh my God, like this is almost my character. Now, once again, I feel like I like my character a lot more. I feel like it's a little more relatable, and still I had to text you and have you walk me off the ledge, because I was like, oh shit. Like,
I think that's I think that's a good point too. Like if once you get to this step of the process, I think it's good if the stuff that off the top of your head, you want to use for just tone, atmosphere, voice, like we said before, great. Throw those in a list of like, that kind of helps keep you focused in terms of when you're writing your first, draft and second draft. But once you actually get down to like searching for those comps, like, if you do find something you come across that is, it's okay, unless you literally wrote, Hunger Games, again, like, or Harry Potter. Okay, then you have a problem. But for the most part,
I feel like in retrospect, I would have advised myself to research comps and then stop reading in genre, because I don't think it's been helpful for me. I've been doing it maybe for enjoyment, but it's kind of like I'm getting these kind of punches to the chest because I keep coming across similar things that I don't know if it's beneficial. I feel like I should have done the process, gotten the comps, made a list, and then noped out of the genre and moved into something completely else, like sci-fi or whatever, lit fic or something.
And I kind of did that. I don't think I was reading mostly fantasy and sci-fi while I was writing this. So I just like stepped out of genre because I didn't want to read stuff that was in my own. So I would have started copying those things, which I know, people are expectations, blah, blah, blah. Go listen to our genre expectations episode. But, I didn't want to just all of a sudden find myself like stealing something or, subconsciously taking something that's just like, oh, this is a trope in all these thrillers. But maybe pulling something from a fantasy or sci-fi might kind of interject something a little bit different to it. So, and it wasn't towards the end when I was actually trying to find actual comps. I started reading more thrillers and more espionage stuff. So now I'm like, it's too late. The book's written. So I don't care if I find something that's similar to, I'm like, oh well. So yeah, I don't know. I think we covered quite a bit there. All the highlights. I'll include some links in the post for some research I had come across that highlights some of the stuff and get into some more detail. But Tim, what are you reading, watching lately?
So reading, I just started Perfume, Story of a Murderer by Suskind.
Don't know.
And I think they adapted it into a movie sometime in the early aughts. I'm not sure. And I completely dismissed it. And I was like watching a bit of YouTube, and I saw like an interview with like Cobain from the early 90s. And he was just saying that he was reading this book over and over again, brought it with him on tour. And I was like, that's interesting. Like, I'm kind of curious. It turns out Scentless Apprentice on In Utero is based on this book. It's a really interesting book. Yeah. It's really crazy, especially when you think about, my wife and I were just talking about this, getting across, your senses during reading, and like the way they tackle scent and smell in this is really interesting and really kind of inspiring, because it takes place in like the late 1800s in France. And this has been a really interesting read so far. So thumbs up. I'm not done yet, but so far it's great. And then what did we just watch? We watched Bones and All.
Bones and All, huh?
Which is, it's funny, talk about comps, dude. Luckily, this is eons ago, but this is a cannibalistic love story that...
is there any other kind of cannibalistic story?
Well, it's funny. So this is written by an author from the Massachusetts area.
Yeah.
I think she lives in Somerville now. And I think she had a foray into sci-fi, and then she wrote this book, and it got some traction. My first, Purge novel, my first after college attempt at writing, was a cannibalistic love story, right? Now, nowhere near as good, but still, it was goes to show that same concept, similar. We were probably in similar zip codes during the time of writing. Really, really interesting that similar concepts can happen at the same time. Her execution, phenomenal. Mine, completely incomplete. But as I was watching the movie, which is quite good, I still had that pang that I had this idea. Yeah. Even though execution wise, I was not capable in my 20s of seeing it through, of bringing it through the beats, of refining it, of getting it to a publishing state. It's just interesting to see, similar ideas succeed. It happens a lot. Like a lot of my ideas I've come across is on streaming platforms. So in a way, it's given me continued confidence that one of these I'll land. Conceptually, I'm there. And now I think through this process and through chatting with you, craft wise, I'm getting there. Yeah. So in a way, it was kind of inspiring. And thumbs up on that movie. It was good. Trent and Atticus Ross did the soundtrack, which is pretty cool. It's got Timothée Chalamet.
Yeah, that's that comes back to our ideas episode too, right? If you've got an idea, just stick with it. Unless, again, you're writing Hunger Games, then don't stick with it.
How about you? What are you reading and watching?
Let's see. So reading, I am just starting this book called The Warrior's Apprentice. It's by, I had read another book by this author, Lois McMaster Bujold. The last one was a high fantasy novel, The Curse of Chalion. This is kind of like the second book someone had suggested. She's like, if you like the first one, and read this one because it's more sci-fi. But this is written back in like the 80s. So she's like, I'm curious to see what you think of sci-fi written in the 80s and the characters and whatnot. It's so far it's good. It's the author, she's great. I just the flow of words in the scenes is just kind of really nice. So
what's the POV?
Just third person.
Is it omniscient?
No.
Is it limited?
Yeah, because it's limited to basically one character. I mean, she's jumped to other characters, but like, within a scene break. But no, and it's like it's deep into like, she'll have even like the italicized thoughts of that character and what they're, in those moments. So, but it's good. I'm enjoying it so far. It's like one of 7 books in the series though. So I don't know, I'll see if I stick with it, but enjoying that so far. As for watching, I finally got back into watching some TV here. I just finished Marvelous Miss Maisel season 5, the series finale. I very much enjoyed that series.
Did you have like a nice cozy chamomile while you watched that?
I did, actually. I sat on my couch, I had my slippers on, yeah, I was all snuggled in
and
my
a
blanket.
Cat laying on your lap.
Yep. And with some tea, and yeah, I don't know. I enjoyed that show. It's, it's funny to finish that's it's season 5, and then I just finished Succession season 4, their series finales, right? And both these last seasons, you can tell like they had an idea where they wanted things to go, but you could tell there was like a lot of filler episodes. And it's like, I think you get to a point where you have seasons that are like 8 to 10 episodes that are hour long. It just feels like some of the jokes get drawn on a little too long. And like, there's one last night I was like, all right, let's move on. Let's move on from this. Like, I don't know why you're filling this time like this. Like, this is just more anxiety of people not being able to do something. And it's a little frustrating to watch. So people who are creating these shows, just know that you can chop up the time. Although I know.
Yeah, I feel like it's interesting when you think about like long form television where they must have the seasonal beats, episodic beats, and they probably do have, right, like episodes like 3 through 6. We don't need to push the seasonal plot forward. Let's tell self-contained stories, and that's probably where like
it gets,
at least that's where it loses me, where it gets like a little flabby, unless it becomes really character based. And I think that's one of the ways that Mad Men excelled. That if it wasn't always pushing this overarching plot forward, at least the character journeys in those middle episodes were still kind of riveting.
Yeah, I will say that like they were within each episode. There's always I thought a really creative and fun thing. So they do a lot of flash forwarding in this one to various time points.
Is this for Miss Maisel?
Yeah. They jump all over the place time wise and kind of show you where everyone is and the relationships at that time, and which I enjoyed that. But then there was just some moments where like this joke of this back and forth, what do you do? And it's like, it's very fast, a very 1950s kind of humor, but
it speaks volumes that you made it through season 5 of this show, right?
Oh yeah, I enjoyed it. I thought it was great.
When there's so much like really just filler content that's completely tepid, for you to go through an entire series. Yeah, maybe I'll check it out.
I thought it was great. I mean, it probably only needed 4 seasons, but I mean,
if there was 4 seasons, you'd just say that it could have been 3.
That's true. Just wrap this up, Could
have been 1 episode.
But I was happy with the finale too, and the way they got there and kind of just finalized things. So they did a good job. Like the first episode, it was just like they had like 2 or 3 characters that were kind of like secondary, and they just got rid of them pretty quickly, and it all made sense. And I was like, okay, that's how you handle that. I see where this is going, and winding down and focusing on just like the core characters and where they are by the end. So that's been it. I haven't watched a movie in a while. At least a good one. So anyways, I think that's our episode.
All right.
What are we going to get into the next episode?
Thought we were going to chat a little bit about cover design process, which seems light years away from where I am, but it's what you've just finished up.
Yeah, I just finished up. I got tweaks back recently, and I got to make more decisions about it and see if it all fits and makes things work and look good. So I think that's what we're gonna do for next episode. Should be fun, and I think that's our episode. So thanks for listening. If you enjoyed it, send it on to a friend. You can send us feedback on Twitter, writer_syndrome. We're on Instagram now at Writer Syndrome Books. And for all the episodes, go to writersyndrome.com. And I think that's it, right?
That's it, man.
Keep writing.